Chapter 1061. Hatred First. Every time I watch the man's eyes, there is a bit of hatred in the eyes. If it wasn't for him, this village would not have been razed to the ground. At the moment of continuous artillery fire, it is fortunate that Bobo was not there at the time, otherwise it may be true will lead by example and rush up to stop such shells. As the captain, Gong Yi doesn't have any specific responsibilities. He just used some other emotions to examine all of this. After all, as a fair and equitable person, he must do it. When there is a problem, there is no way to solve it. But at the same time, Gong Yi also discovered another point. Shilu seemed to be thinking about some other things during this process. Could it be that he remembered Marshal Tucci at the beginning, but this is unlikely. There was no relationship between them. Any relationship, if it is a feeling of distress, it should never be exposed from Shiru's body. After all, the man almost killed his brother back then, but what I have to say is that there are some strange buildings on this small island that both Luo Zipping and Gong Yi can't quite understand, because he has these buildings they were all in an abnormal position, and when asked about Bobo, he didn't know why. But there must be a building in this place. It has its point, but if it is connected, it looks like a place similar to the 8 trigrams array, but at this time Gong Yi didn't put this first, speaking of which, Luo Zipping is the most authoritative. He had to wait until he discovered this fact and verified it in his heart before he could know what kind of situation it was. As expected, after a few days, such an array was arranged, and the location had been recorded. Came out. Then I drew a piece of paper and sent it to Gong Yi. Gong Yi compared himself when he thought of the 8 trigrams, and found that this was indeed an 8 trigrams array, and it was the most primitive one with many years of history. 8 trigrams array, are there other people who have passed through this place? Otherwise, how could the little fox know such a thing? They were all summoned, but now they need to restore the building, which requires a ruthless hand, so that night Gong Yi just led someone to sneak into Lan Ying's father's room, which was a large camp. But unfortunately there are no people on duty outside tonight. Just like this, a few people lurked in without any obstacles, but at the same time, Gong Yi also had another incredible thing, that the destroyed sculpture it was not abandoned, but they were stored in the warehouse, placed in a small corner, and then directed to the roadside. Aruma and others took this back. Anyway, this can at least reduce the time to rebuild a sculpture again, and the support people can come faster. But the only unexpected thing is still the following. I really never expected that he would do such a thing, nor did he expect that since that time, the trajectory of everything has changed. When the sculpture was transported back to the base by Aruma, Luo Zipping couldn't help but change his face when he saw the sculpture, as if he had encountered some evil spirit, but at this moment, Luo Zipping quickly picked up the one next to him. Hammer, want to break that sculpture? Aruma got his front all of a sudden. This is Gong Yi, they exchanged their lives from that place, how could they break it at will? But at this moment, there was a bloody light in Luo Zipping's eyes, it was as if he saw something that couldn't be said. At this moment no one knows what happened, but the only thing that is clear is that the situation is very dangerous, and Luo Zipping doesn't seem to be able to see this sculpture, but what kind of identity does it appear in? After all, Gong Yi delivered it to. It is not easy for Aruma to throw away his own things at will, but at present, it is not very convenient for him to take action without knowing what he is. After all, some things are beyond his expectations. But at the same time, what I never imagined is, Luo Zipping actually rushed towards this sculpture without even a bit of buffer. If he didn't get out of the way and desperately wanted to live in this sculpture, then it was possible he will also suffer a huge injury. After all, this time he doesn't seem to be joking, and he has never seen such a big temper since he knew Luo Zipping. After all, he is a reincarnated architect. There are certain things he does better than himself in terms of human and sophistication, but only this time he is out of control and rushes directly towards himself. I didn't think about it at all. Chapter 1062. Dumbfounded. So you can only stay in place, completely unresponsive, but in the next step, Luo Zipping suddenly suppressed some of his emotions, and tried to restrain his steps not to step out. This scene was discovered on Aruma, and he seemed to see it. He wanted to imply that he was hunting your sister, so Aruma, who did not hesitate, started directly, and Shiryu's brother on the side saw this scene. Came out quickly. But at this time, Aruma knocked him unconscious, and then moved the sculpture back. No one knew what it was, but the thing without hesitation was that the sculpture must have been placed on the square back then, to help what should be sealed in that one as an evil spirit. Only after it is not ranked in this position and sent back, will there really be a chance to face the next thing, but at the same time, there is one thing that Gong Yi does not quite understand, why Aruma sent a sculpture he hadn't come back for so long, and it stands to reason that Shiryu's brother is still there. In the camp, there is absolutely no problem in helping him respond, so he had no choice but to wait outside with Shiryu, waiting for his response. But at this time, Aruma didn't come back, and Meyer came back. It seems that it was because of the alternate version. It seems that this time Aruma was too tired to move the sculpture back. Otherwise, how could someone else come together? The person immediately set off and ran to the other side to have a look. If the man was doing something, if it was appropriate, he would just rush over and settle the matter, but I have to say that he still kept an eye on it. At this time, all the people who were acting as agents of Gong Yi sneaked in from the side, not to say that there are some other problems, but just want to use some other problems to expand. Of course, there is one thing that he did not take into account. After all, he did not expect him to do such an extreme thing. After all, the man was still in ambush beside him. After a few people were caught, he quickly jumped from one side. Come out, and practice that. Sinister smile, it seems that they should have already calculated that they will come to this place. Fortunately, Shiryu didn't just need Shiryu and Meyer to cooperate properly, then it would only be a matter of minutes to solve this person, but during the period, he would not take action. After all, he was already trapped by others. Do you still want to use your life to do such a thing? At the same time, it is true that Shiryu wants to do something. This person has been gone for so long, but she has not come back. You asked her what problems she encountered, so she was sent to Meyer. After a while, when Meyer was halfway through, he saw a line left by Gong Yi to memorize, nothing more than to say that if it can be solved quickly, then continue, if not, it is completely a good method. After he went back, after Lu Wei said this to Shilu decided to go back first, after discussing everything, and then come back to rescue Gong Yi. At this time, Lan Ying's father came out, looked at Gong Yi's face, and found that he was a wanted criminal worth 600 million. I didn't expect you to be floating on the sea all the time. No wonder they have such a high price to hunt you down. It turns out that things in the past really exceeded my budget. Now I just need to send you to the Admiral. On the other hand, you are just something to make up for what I have done. Hearing this, Gong Yi didn't deal with it. After all, what he said was indeed true. If he really caught a pirate of 600 million, then basically no matter what kind of fault it was, he could be punished by the Admiral. The side and efficacy, after all, this is famous on the list. After chasing the prisoner for a long time, you must be happy next time to get the Turtle King, but Shiryu and Meyer, who ran back at this time, found Luo Zipping who had fallen to the ground. They don't know what happened, but to find that other people are in this place, which can't help but be incredible. But when Luo Zipping woke up, Aruma specifically asked what was the reason for his condition just now. It was Luo Zipping who asked Aruma to blindfold him, and then took her to the side of the sculpture and waited until after groping for a while, Luo Zipping told the truth. This thing can't be sculpted, but you must know that he is a force of evil, and now it has been smashed, and it is useless to go back, unless someone is willing to seal this thing at the cost of his life, otherwise everything is just a joke. If you don't believe it, you can try it. After hearing this, several people around were stunned. At this time, Shilu also explained the news that Gong Yi was staying in that place, and could not help but lose a backbone, and everyone suddenly didn't know what to do. Chapter 1063. Gong Yi is tied. Chapter 3. He had to listen to Bobo's words. After all, he was the only local person on this island, and he was the one who could lead these people through the winding paths, but he just didn't know what was going to happen. But at the same time, Aruma also discovered another point. Shiryu seems to be quite familiar with this place. Could it be possible that he and Luo Zipping also appeared in such a cave before, but Shiryu did not intend to talk to everyone. The person confessed everything, and Aruma followed him. Shiryu's brother did not observe such a situation. He just took care of Luo Zipping and hoped that he could repair the sculpture. He was pleading with him, and he even used the trick of hugging his thighs. I have to say that maybe this thing is really useful to put it back, but it seems that it is not so simple now, so Luo Zipping found a few people at night to wipe out some of the potatoes in the foundation. Just wait until the next day to air dry and put the sculpture on, it is enough. This sculpture is still intact, and there are no cracks on it. If it is said that under normal circumstances, the demon can definitely be sealed, but I don't know what the situation is. After all, this matter is not. Just kidding, this is a decision. It is an important key point for all people's lives to have no worries. Anyway, this matter has been settled. Let's finish work here today, and when these things have been done the next day, you can quickly put this sculpture up in the early morning, or else. And stay here. Wait for 2 or 3 hours, and then you can quickly put that thing on it. Basically, all the objects on this small island will be controlled, and then the white fog will disappear. You can also send another person before you say what you said. Waiting in the cave where the little fox will come out if you guess correctly. After hearing this, Aruma couldn't help but be a little shocked, so he and Shiryu's brother guarded this small square, and then let Bobo go back to the cave to wait, and by the way, he specially asked Bobo a few words. Don't forget to keep an eye on Shiryu. His movements and behaviors have been a little weird in the past 2 days. However, Lan Ying was also informed of such a one. Everyone began to be wary of Shiryu, but Shiryu's elder brother Aruma didn't tell it, but Luo Zipping didn't know this either. The 2 more important characters in the plan gathered in this place. I actually don't want to do more, but Gong Yi doesn't. As a new member of the pirates, I always have to show some sincerity, but Shilu has done some very abnormal things in the past 2 days. At night, when everyone was sleeping, Aruma woke up one night and found Shiryu wandering outside. He didn't know what he was waiting for, but when he fell asleep, he didn't see another person. It's just that Shiryu was walking back and forth in the corridor alone. If the mind is impure, there must be a certain possibility. So in any case, we should beware of this person, but when several people were wandering in this place, they also discovered another thing. At the beginning of the 2nd hour, a person came to this place. Both himself and Shiryu's older brother were in a silent coma, just a little confused. But at this time, because of overtime work, Shilu's brother slept very sweetly by the side, and he was not in a hurry to wake him up. But at this time the man in black appeared again. I have to say, it must have been a certain agreement with Shiryu, but I just don't know what it has to do with it. But what Luo Zipping had already instructed should be done by himself anyway, so Aruma called Shiryu's brother directly, so that if the mastermind behind the case was really Shiryu, then he would do things. The reason for this should be weighed. At this moment of fire, Shiryu really appeared, and he was holding an inexplicable thing in his hand, but it looked like a book with some strange appearance, and then he quickly ran to Aruma's, handed it to him in front of him, took Shiryu's brother and left. This made Aruma a little surprised. The book he opened actually had Marshal Tucci's name written on it. Could this book have anything to do with him? Wait until he opened the 2nd page. I found that the structure of this sculpture seems to be similar to some of its specific records. Could it be that this sculpture was placed in this place after he built it? No wonder Luo Zipping acted so strangely before. The 2 of them have always been staying together. It proves that Luo Zipping should also have a share in this building. Chapter 1064. Shift. But what was the reason for this kind of news to herself? Aruma couldn't help but ponder for a while, and then continued to read the book, waiting for the next person to arrive, and she seemed to have missed it when she was halfway through reading the book. A crucial piece of information, because the front and back are not connected anyway. At this time, Aruma's sharp eyes found that a page was torn from the center of the book. If he guessed correctly, someone should have deliberately blocked the information so that he would not know it. In this case, I have to consider all things and solve this matter. After all, this must be a big problem for me. I really didn't expect you to be obediently guarding this place. It's almost time. Give me this sculpture. I'll take her away from this island, otherwise you can put it on it, just bring it with you. It's just endless calamities and recurring curses. Suddenly a man in black appeared. Aruma hurriedly closed the book, and put the sculpture behind her back. It wasn't really that big. It can only be said that it was slightly smaller when looking at it from a distance. There is also a large-scale sculpture on the top, and Shiryu's brother was taken away by Shiryu. I have to say that he should have thought about this long ago, and exchanged a book for the proof of his presence, but at the same time Gong Yi did not. In such a matter, it also gave Aruma a chance to hesitate. After all, if such a thing is decided by oneself, will there be some other problems when Gong Yi comes back? After all, she is the one who is leading the way in this place, but at this moment neither Shilu nor Lanying are around and they can't let the man succeed. As long as this sculpture is put on it, it means that the little foxes will come back. Bo will be happy, and Gong Yi will also be saved. Under such a choice, who would choose to give this sculpture to the man in front of him? You are joking. Since this thing can save my brother's life, how could it be so easy to give it to me? What about you? Why don't you think about it? You should think about the matter of daydreaming, and at the same time, it's not me talking nonsense. As long as this sculpture returns, our reinforcements will come. After hearing this, the man in black snorted coldly, as if he was dissatisfied with Aruma's ignorance of current affairs, but there was no need to be polite to him at this time. After all, he didn't want this sculpture to leave his field of vision. Beyond the scope, this is the trust that Shiryu's older brother has placed in him. If you want to gain a foothold in this place, you have to deliver good things to them, but what Luo Zipping thinks, he has not figured it out until now. An attitude that does not intend to resolve the matter. That's okay to say, but now it seems that he deliberately let it go. So is the final outcome to be changed by himself, or to wait for Gong Yi's return? At this moment, the woman also ran back. He didn't expect Shiryu to return to this place to meet him. What he was holding in his hand was a weapon that he had left in that place before. Hold it now, my brother won't cause you any trouble, and this time, only you can get through this matter. If he is present, it may add more trouble to you. At this time, the man in black quickly turned his head and planned to catch Shiryu. How could Aruma let her take a shot at this time? He quickly drew his knife and rushed forward. The man in black should not have considered this, and just shrank his neck. Dodged such a knife backwards. The attack was too violent, and the two quickly entangled with each other. It is not ugly to see that Aruma is still very skilled in wielding the knife, and it should be a very good weapon. It took many years. At this time, Shiryu and Shiryu's brother could only watch the two of them fight each other. I have to say that the process was too violent. At first, the two people hadn't reacted, and then the black-clothed and him began to fight. When we went together, a few people really didn't know what the situation was like. But at this time, the point was that the two of them quickly fought to the side, and at this time Aruma also understood what the two of them meant. In this way, the man in black was led away, and Shiryu and Shiryu's brother quickly picked up the sculpture and sent her to the top of the foundation. No matter what original intention, as long as this thing, put it back, reinforcements will be in place, and they will have no problem surviving. I have to say that this square is indeed a bit big. Just as the two people were carrying the sculpture and sprinting towards it, the man in black reacted and quickly escaped from Aruma's shackles. At this time, Aruma also directly rushed up. Chapter 1065, Distribution. Now that this task has been handed over, he must protect his safety no matter what, not to mention that if Shiryu's brother did not do this, then only himself would be able to take action. At this time, the matter is far more difficult than he imagined. Be a little embarrassed. So in order to prepare for all the emergencies, Gong Yi deliberately stopped the man in black first, but no matter what he did, he couldn't completely stop him, which made him a little distressed, but he continued to look at himself. In front of him, the man in black must be removed, otherwise their lives are at stake. But at this time, Gong Yi also discovered another point. The man in black seemed to have no intention of drinking alcohol. He was not trying to prevent the sculpture from being put on it, but to do some other things. It also makes it difficult for myself to think clearly. But just as Shuru and Shiryu's older brother worked together to put that sculpture on it, a light appeared in this small village, starting from the center of the square, and quickly spreading to the surrounding area, without a trace. People know what this is, but it has to be said that it is a little weird. Could it be that this man was sent by Lan Ying's father? Besides him, who else on this island would stop this from happening? But at this time, the little fox did appear in this place, but it's a pity that they are still the same as before that. Situation is not as guaranteed by Luo Zipping and Bobo. As long as this sculpture is repaired, everything can return to the way it used to be. There were not those living little greys jumping around in this place, but some of the dead little foxes who were lying on the ground before suddenly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. At this time, Shilu's brother quickly covered Shilu's eyes, and Gong Yi felt a little sad at this time. If it wasn't for the previous incident, he wouldn't be like this. But at this time the man in black was still there. He was dangling in front of him, which made Gong Yi a little worse. Could it be that his purpose is anything else? Should he just leave? The headgear was uncovered. This was Gong Yi's discovery. He clearly did not reveal the news that he had come to the island. Why did Lan Ying's father still find this? So when I saw her at this moment, I immediately recognized her. I have to say that Lan Ying's father does have some characteristics, otherwise, there is no way to enter the Four Emperor Thieves. But no one would have imagined that he would actually create a new pirate group on this small island, specially responsible for recruiting people who have nowhere to go, and then gather them together to come capture Lan Ying once again. I really don't know what is in Lan Ying that can keep him persistent until now. Since his parents died, no one has protected Lan Ying anymore, so his father can be considered very arrogant. This makes Gong Yi very hateful. After all, Lan Ying, as a person who has been by his side since the beginning of the pirate group, Gong Yi is also very distressed about his recent events. Therefore, I hope that Lan Ying's father can stay away from him, otherwise, there should be nothing else to do except selling. After all, it is obvious that Lan Ying's father is not a good person. And the new pirate she recently created can be said to be doing all kinds of evil. I have to say that he really refreshed one of his concepts, but at this time, Gong Yi also took into account another point. He suddenly appeared in this place. Did he want to leave Lan Ying with himself, or would there be some other conditions? He might be inclined that he could come up with some other ideas and other needs, and that far more than he wanted to take Lan Ying. It was much easier for Sakura to hand over, and he didn't want to face conflict with him. After all, there might indeed be some gaps in strength. He is the leader of the older generation of pirates, and he is also the person in charge. He must be far stronger on the side of the network than himself, so at this moment, after careful consideration, Gong Yi chose a more discounted one. Method in. But we must also understand a truth. Not all tolerance and concessions can be exchanged for a certain value. Just like now, the other party did not think that his concession was because of what, but thought that he was afraid of him. This is really something Gong Yi didn't consider at all, but if she thinks so, she doesn't have any opinion, anyway. People who are arrogant and look down on others first, usually fail in the end, the worse it is. And a thoughtful person like himself can quietly arrange such a plan, so Gong Yi gave Shilu a gesture to the two of them, and Shilu's brother sent Shilu directly to find Lan Ying. Chapter 1066. Purpose. First, hide the real purpose of this man. Apart from him, there should be nothing else. After all, he can't come to himself, just to find this sculpture. Could it be that he has some kind of deal with other people? But this the place, except the man in black who was let go before. There is nothing superfluous, and there is no superfluous population wandering on this small island, and it has been razed to the ground. How could someone still be alive without being discovered? So in such a situation, there would be no difference for me. But Lan Ying's father should not think of sculpture directly, but the scene of this place has been completely restored. You can even say that the little foxes are lined up in front of him, which makes him a little surprised. A few points, but there is no way to compromise from this place to consider some other things. So in desperation, Gong Yi had to check the news with them first to see if those little foxes are still alive. At least Bobo is definitely not a problem, but if the situation on Aruma's side improves, he will definitely come back and report to himself, but he has never come back, and the man in black has no intention of leaving. Therefore, Gong Yi wants to communicate with the people in black with common sense, but the other party ignores him, and even some communication methods are gone. I want to ask, is there any purpose for you to come to this place? Is it that sculpture or someone on the opposite side smiled, revealing white kiba teeth. I have to say that Lan Yuxian felt very terrifying at this moment. Pressure is still there. And at this moment, for me, I am afraid there is nothing to pay attention to, but at this moment, a feeling of fear pervades, and these things are also a kind of fear for me. But Gong Yi, as the leader of the pirate group at this moment, must not show any fear. This must be his only bottom line, otherwise if he gets this pirate group, he can easily be defeated. Then this time, he had a big accident. And Lan Ying's side hasn't been optimistic about the situation. If Lan Yuxian is looking for someone to ask for someone, then Gong Yi should really think about dealing with it, but Hualuma and Bobo have never brought those. The little fox came to help himself. Could it be that he encountered a bigger problem there? But in fact, Gong Yi basically did not go wrong. Aruma and Bobo were in that cave, because they met that little fox. The reason was that they were regarded as intruders. Even Bobo doesn't know him anymore. Maybe it's because Bobo didn't change back after he was transformed, but at this time, Aruma let Bobo transform, but found that he couldn't change back to the previous little fox. When Aruma looked at Bobo again, he just shrugged and said that he would never change back to the way he was just now, which surprised everyone a bit, and the village chief quickly took with a cane. He ordered the surrounding little foxes to flank the two of them. Then they drove Bobo and Aruma and went straight to the outside. When the sculpture, they found that Gong Yi and the man in black were fighting under the sculpture on their body, so the village chief ordered them. The little fox quickly separated the two of them and escorted them away together. At this time, Lan Yuxian twitched the corners of her mouth and smiled. Gong Yi felt that some things would be bad, but she didn't know where to start. After all, this matter is already too complicated. If I think Lan Yuxian is malicious, maybe it's these things. The little fox doesn't know himself as the biggest trouble right now, but he doesn't dare to judge too much in an instant. After all, some things in what I think are completely too extremes, but there are not so many things to consider at this moment. Gong Yi can only adapt to the situation, but fortunately there are not many people who have been kidnapped, only Aruma and himself. Of course there is also the accompanying Bobo. After this one transforms into a human state, it will never return to the state of a little fox. After hearing Aruma say this, Gong Yi was a little surprised. At this time, Lan Yuxian snorted coldly, as if to express a disdain for Bobo, but Gong Yi smiled immediately. One day he will regret his cold humming voice. After all, who will save who will not be sure, anyway. I will definitely not take Lan Yuxian away when I leave, so I can also solve a big trouble for Lan Ying. After all, the relationship between the two of them is obvious. It wasn't very good before. The relationship between Lan Ying and Ant should be okay, but now that I see Lan Yuxian, I know it's not so good. Chapter 1067. Action. So no matter what the reason is, Gong Yi has to help Lan Ying get through this difficult time, but he didn't expect this man to do anything else. For himself, Lan Yuxian is actually a complete the type of people I have never met, but I have learned about different people from the mouths of various people. I have to say that the Four Emperor Thieves was probably a very popular one back then. Otherwise, how could there be only 444 members, and each of them was a very powerful type, but at the same time, I never thought that Lan Yuxian would leave this sea. The thieves came out. Do not know if he was expelled from him or because he wanted an independent portal. It should be the first one. After all, there is such a system and organization, including such a resounding name. Which pirate group member who pursues excitement is willing to directly abandon this, and this name is also well known. There is absolutely no problem in this sea, but also for Gong Yi, it is also completely ignored, but at least at this moment, Lan Yuxian's smile when he looked at himself was indeed penetrating, so he took out something from Kabuto, which looked like a small bottle, and an unknown liquid was poured out of it. But this is a kind of purple yuhi color, which is biased towards a special reagent. I feel like I have seen it somewhere, and it should be some juice made from some fruit, but at this moment no one dares to try it, but at this moment, Lan Yuxian quickly took off the bottle cap and drank the unknown bottle of juice. At this moment, Gong Yi's face changed, and he ran back without turning his head. When he saw the group of little foxes who came to meet him, he didn't know whether the other party was an enemy or a friend. Anyway, he kept shouting for them. Turn around quickly. When those little foxes really saw the person behind him, his eyes changed, and the village chief quickly raised the crutches to make a comment. After protecting such a sculpture, he went back again. He quickly protected these crowds, and I have to say that his movements were still very fast. Then Gong Yi also immediately helped a raised demon arrow. It has to be said that when Matsuri came out with the demon sword, the surrounding air was constantly flowing, and Lan Yuxian, who had transformed at this time, was in his eyes. It is also explained. A feeling of greed. This thing is really good, no doubt everyone wants it, but I also need to measure it to see if I have such, along with whether I have such ability, but at the same time there is one thing that makes Gong Yi very confused. If it is said that under such a premise, what kind of attitude should I take to face it? It may be inadvertent, or it may be a rare thing, but as long as it is decided by oneself, it must be done. But this demon sword combined with his own escape from the earth will definitely be able to solve it smoothly, so Gong Yi quickly grabbed Mayor and discussed such a matter with him, and the other party did not refuse. So Gong Yi was taken to sneak directly into his younger brother. At this time, Lan Yuxian also suddenly stopped the movement in his hand, as if he was observing his position, but how could he know his own escape from the earth? Where is he? This earth escape technique is definitely useless in metal, but now he has nothing in his hands, and the sculptures on the side are also protected. It can be said that life is worry-free now, so naturally, there is no need to worry about these messy things, but at this moment, I also let myself not consider some market issues. Maybe I have not considered it well, but now it seems that it is necessary to solve this in the shortest possible time. So Gong Yi quickly dragged Mayor up, and Mayor inserted a sword into Lan Yuxian's back. It has to be said that after taking this fruit, he turned into an iron-clad body. At least at this moment, Mei Yi's sword didn't pierce his back. Originally, the place in the back pocket should be regarded as a fatal blow. If there is no special protection, then basically it has been solved, but I didn't think that this glass of juice from the Buddhist family is equivalent to having a body with a copper wall and an iron wall. When Gong Yi thought of this scene, he couldn't help but hesitate. Then his eyes narrowed again, and at this time Lan Ying suddenly appeared on the edge of the place. Gong Yi grabbed Mayor directly and asked him to pull the sword. The two quickly moved back to the village chief's side. It must be said that the situation was a little anxious, but the village chief's protective cover was real. It's easy to use, and that the energy seems to be continuous. Chapter 1068, Adventure 3rd. But Gong Yi doesn't dare to take this risk. Who will be responsible if something goes wrong? Mainly because he sees Lan Ying coming out and wants to join him directly. Otherwise, once this person finds out about its existence, maybe he will do something. What's the matter? And he is now an iron-clad body. The reason why the village chief's evaluation can still be retained is because the aura around him is fluid and can be said to be pervasive, but this barrier is completely closed, but the copper and iron walls on his body are different. If you collide with this thing, you may lose both, and no one can say what will happen at that time. Gong Yi just that way, he didn't say anything, facing Lan Yuxian straight. No matter what, he was the hardest difficulty to overcome, and at this moment, it could be seen that his eyes were tight. Locked tightly on Lan Ying's body. If he guessed correctly, he must be doing something else. Unsurprisingly, at this moment, he slammed into him directly, without thinking about the feelings of the little foxes around him. However, at this moment, the village chief glared and directly inserted that all into the ground. Inside, I have to say that if you have such ability, this skill must be very deep. But at present, no one can stop the war between the two of them. One is to catch prostitution, and the other is to protect the juniors behind him. It has to be said that the war between the two of them, the starting point may be wrong. But it's good to be able to save a little thing for Gong Yi. After all, for now, if Gong Yi wants to face him head-on, it will definitely be difficult to win or lose. His iron walls. And he can't catch a few people for a while. As long as everyone grabs each other's hands, he can follow the escape technique that he has been using in this soil. Do you want to go back with him? If not, we still have a chance to turn defeat into victory. At this time, Lan Ying shook her head firmly. No matter what the reason was, she would never go back with Lan Yuxian. I already knew that this man would usually do things. He leaves, and that's basically a fool's thing. So at this moment without you rejected him, but actually made Gong Yi completely ignorant that the man not only rampaged, but even wanted to kill Chang directly. After he found this juice, he felt he was a little confused and couldn't tell what his ultimate goal was, which made Gong Yi catch Meyer next to him at once. Looked at himself, trying to find out what flaws he had. This type of flaw is usually something everyone wants to try to hide. After all, it is the last killer. If it is exposed, it means that he has no more the bottom line that needs to be guarded. But at the same time, the uneasiness in my heart has been magnified infinitely, but I have to say that there is one thing that makes me feel very surprised, so that is why this Lan Yuxian is constantly hovering at this edge. Is it the village chief's barrier? Is the patient's place the most vulnerable? If he wanders in that place, it has basically been settled. Some problems in this place, so at this moment, in fact, I feel a lot of reluctance and confusion in my heart, but there is no way, that's what happened. Sure enough, after the last payment, that incomparably huge thing suddenly hit this barrier, and all the little foxes shrank back. After all, who has seen such a battle before? Who can afford to do things in this place? The village chief didn't say anything, as if he didn't want to go to war with him, but at this time, the barrier suddenly changed, and those protective shields, some programmed armors turned into one at this moment. Another sharp sword was lined up and quickly aimed at Lan Yuxian. At this time, after the village chief looked at the unknown creature in front of him with anger, if Lan Yuxian dared to continue to charge forward, these swords would be stabbed in his heart one by one. But at this moment, the other party didn't feel anything. Even continued to run forward without hesitation, but this moment is actually a breakthrough point for Gong Yi. His Dodan Earth-style technique can be quickly activated at the moment of conflict between the two of them. After all, who can say for sure about this kind of thing, but if you can take advantage of the hot fight between the two of them, this matter can be solved. It's not a big deal, and this Dodan Earth-style technique can be used to take advantage of the unexpected, so Gong Yi, who didn't hesitate, just rolled his eyes and exchanged glances with the person next to him. Chapter 1069, Prevention. At this time, Mayer keenly grasped the meaning of the other party, which is nothing more than a final impact, but he did not expect this thing to be quite strict. In the process of hitting and rushing towards that barrier, he was constantly watching the ground. It seems that there was a lesson in what happened last time, but at this time there are some things who can say for sure. At this time, the village chief's sword is approaching that one. Lan Yuxian, I have to say, in this way, who can say the war between the Iron Wall and the thousands of swords? And at present, no one knows what the truth is, but as long as it is within the scope of this matter, I may have to pay a certain price for it. After all, if it is not me, how can I provoke him? But at the same time it's exactly as I thought. If Gong Yi didn't appear in this place this time, it would still come to this place, and you don't have to blame yourself. After you understand it, it becomes very simple, but before you understand it, it is a very difficult matter, and it can even be said that it is difficult to understand for a while. But no matter what the reason is, the best thing for me at the moment is to solve it first. After all, if you are going to become a catastrophic disaster, it will be difficult to handle. At the same time, let Gong Yi consider on the other hand, Mayer's demon arrows couldn't pierce the man. That proved that he is looking for another weapon, otherwise the cooperation between the two will never reach the limit. At this time, that Lan Yuxian has quickly cut into that barrier, that sword as one by one he kept hitting the ground on the surface of his body, but in fact found it to be completely useless. At this time, the village chief can't help but sway his face. Sometimes it is like this. Once you have something subvert your thinking, then basically there is nothing to change again, and continue. But at the same time, this really makes the village chief it's hard to accept, but Gong Yi also knows that this is his last bottom line, and he must solve it quickly in such a short period of time. But just in the middle of not preparing the soil, that Lan Yuxian actually crushed a small fox to death. At this time, screams came one after another, but at this time Lan Ying's face turned pale. After all, the one who did the wrong thing was herself. The father may also need to take some responsibility. So without any hesitation, she lit up her body at that moment. Gong Yi didn't react at this time, and only after the light really dissipated did Gong Yi realize that Lan Ying's real body was a sword. The surface of the sword shone a little bit, as if to bring out how mighty he is. There is no time to hesitate at this time. After all, Lan Yuxian has already started to attack at this time, and the village chief can't defend, so at this moment, he had no choice but to gradually take this over. Then he quickly rushed towards the front. A Doden Earth-style technique passed. The other party did not respond, but it was his good time. He passed directly through his back center, and also stopped a group of little foxes under his feet. At this time, the village chief couldn't help but be stunned, and he probably didn't expect that under such a critical situation, there were still people who wanted to take action. But you must know that you are not just to save the village chief, but you want to ban the broadcast. After all, they are a whole. If you say one of them, then the other people will have some resentment. At that time, people like this, it is very likely that it will go over and over again, and in the process of non-stop revenge, this kind of thing will repeat many times. Therefore, it is not that he has no strength, so he planned to save all the people, but as expected, Lan Yuxian immediately fell to the ground at this moment, and what kept surging behind him was the blue blood was something I had never seen before. But at the same time, it made all the little foxes cheer. Maybe she didn't expect a hero to appear like this, but her blue blood is indeed lingering in Gong Yi's mind. It seems that this thing really has some weird, but I haven't touched it at all. But it has to be proved that once he is really something that he is familiar with, then some things may become weird. After all, the juice of this fruit seems to have been seen somewhere, such a deep purple yuhi color. It really made me unforgettable, but at this time, I checked it in my mind, but I didn't find anything suitable. I feel that the color of this juice is very common, but why does it turn into an impregnable wall? So at the moment when he fell, Gong Yi kept wandering in the field, trying to find the bottle. Chapter 1070, Bottle First. It's just that it has nothing to do with him where the bottle appears, but Gong Yi thought about it and decided to find the bottle. After all, under the current situation, he doesn't have much to think about. And looking at it now, if I find this bottle again, it may cause some other disputes because of this juice. If there is an identical Iron Man like Lan Yuxian, then there will be no way. There is no way I can solve it myself, and after using the demon's sword like this, Mayer's physical strength is depleted very fast. It can be said that he should not be able to fight anymore in a short period of time, so Gong Yi said the little bottle that I was looking for carefully in that place, hoping to get some traces of him. But he found that the ground was empty. At this time, Gong Yi found that the sword was stuck straight into Lan Yuxian's body, and that the body of the sword was still shaking. I don't know why it was because what, but in addition to such a thing, I decided to solve other problems first. The arrow on Lan Yuxian's body. The moment I actually pulled out a sword, the blood surged rapidly, changing from blue to the original Yuhi color. What kind of change, but his blood is a different color from ordinary people. When he took out that sword and counted the number of people, Gong Yi was always holding that sword, and Aruma didn't know whether to say it or not. After all, while taking care of Mayer, he also saw it. At that moment, Lan Ying flashed a golden light on her body, not knowing what it was. But it obviously turned it into a sword, and that he is the one that Gong Yi is holding in his hand. I don't know how to imply him, but Gong Yi doesn't realize that Lan Ying is in his hand now, and that sword has been shaking. I don't know why, but Aruma on the side could tell that it was because he killed his own father and penetrated into Lan Yuxian's back. It can be said that people basically have no way to survive. And the blood surged at that time. If it really can survive, I am afraid it will take a long time to rescue. But at this time Gong Yi didn't think too much, just kept cleaning the battlefield. At this moment, Wei Xingli suddenly ran over. No one knew where they came from, but they couldn't tell. There was an anxious look on his face. This was Gong Yi's sudden realization that they were not Lan Yuxian's people from the pirates, so he directly asked him if he came to find Lan Yuxian, and did not let him when they saw the mutated giant behind them. They quickly nodded, as if they were still questioning it. Why does the person in front of him know the name of the boss? After all, he said that no matter who mentions his name in this place, it should be his enemy, so a few people hesitated for a while. Then nodded. After all, they were looking for when people arrive. It is a good thing if they have confidence. This time, Gong Yi suddenly thought of an idea, and asked if there was about that juice, if there was any. A small bottle, and it was brought by a stranger. That person was wearing a huge kabuto hat on his head, and when he was talking to Lan Yuxian actually turned away everyone around him. He is not like this at ordinary times. He is always with everyone. Although it was said that he was a thief of the 4 emperors before. But usually he seems to be a good person, so this time Gong Yi. Think of the head of the 4 emperor thieves. If this time he wants to get rid of Lan Yuxian, then give him this bottle of medicine. There is already a way out, and now it seems that this Lan Yuxian's death is not about the sword that pierced her heart. It was because of that drug. If that juice was taken, a huge change should have occurred in a short period of time, but I don't know why she was so stupid. She just took it without asking anything clearly. Originally, I wanted to take this opportunity to give the two of them a chance to be very good. After all, I also understand that my mood is still necessary. The aunt has died, so there is only one father left. Do you want to be lenient too? Under such circumstances, I would like to ask that juice, have you ever have tasted tears? After all, that in the small bottle is a very strange juice that comes from another company. The above is extracted, and your boss is in trouble because of this thing. If you have any other information, please provide me with it. Chapter 1071. Looking for someone. After a few people nodded, they ran away. They didn't see the big man behind Gong Yi, nor did they think that that person was Lan Yuxian. At this time, the sword in Gong Yi's hand suddenly became violent, swaying, which made Gong Yi surprised. But after all, he just flew over in front of him, and he took it directly without thinking much. I didn't expect this sword to be much better than Mayer's. This sword can immediately enter his body, completely boiling his blood. This is a sword that makes me feel very mysterious, but at this time the sword swayed rapidly, glowing brightly under the sunlight, and then quickly transformed into a human shape in a fog, waiting until I could see clearly. It turned out to be blue sakura. How did you become a sword? At this time, Gong Yi was absolutely stunned. He didn't think that Lan Ying was that little weapon that he had cooperated with just now. At this time, Lan Ying looked down at the corpse on the ground, and Gong Yi naturally knew him. What kind of mood? After all, this is his last relative. At this time, Gong Yi coughed and told the truth. In fact, Lan Yuxian didn't die, he just fell into a coma because of excessive blood loss, and because of her and Sha's juice, he has become what he is today. The situation, in fact, was not that it had penetrated into his heart. Shi Lanying looked back and looked at the evolution of Gong Yi. It was an unbelievable, believing look, as if she was questioning what Gong Yi said was wrong, but at this time Gong Yi did not need to explain. If you still believe it, then this matter becomes, I really just didn't think of the brilliance of Lan Ying just now. It should belong to the kind of ancient weapons. If you guessed correctly, he should be one of the 7 ancient weapons, and his brilliance is very similar. You should really read that kind of books when you go back. Are you sure it's because of this fruit? That's right, I'm still looking for that. Well, if I find the liquid in that, there's a way to break it all down, but at the moment, the bottle has disappeared without a trace, and I don't know what the situation is. But at the moment it's definitely not a good thing. If it was said that the drug he gave him before was black, then maybe it's excusable. After hearing this, Lan Ying squatted down and didn't say anything. After all, who can accept such a blow, and can still stand there talking and laughing in the future is simply an unreasonable thing, so at this moment it can be said to be very broken. But at this moment, the two quickly found the small bottle in the ruins, and the village chief took the little fox and his party back to their village to settle down. After all, the previous artillery fire from Lan Yuxian was really destroyed their village with nothing left. At this time, after seeing the ruins, Bobo hated the points in his heart, but he may have no choice but to help repair together. At this time, Luo Zipping has been repairing it for a long time. After all, the moment he saw the sculpture get started, everything has returned to a normal track, and because he likes the village very much, he plans to live in this place, and the village chief appreciates his ability to restore buildings, so he agrees. Bobo is also very happy at this time. After all, Shiliu and Shiliu's brother are more dangerous outside, because the last time Marshal Tucci's death has not been determined. If he suddenly appeared again at the time, then what should Shiliu and Shiliu's elder brother do? So in such a situation, Gong Yi must be happy. But Gong Yi's more headache is, why and Lan Ying searched the whole ruins and couldn't find the one. Could it really be the man in black who took the bottle away? But he moved so fast, it is a bit confusing for people to distinguish it. I just redistributed this thing, and let those people have their own work to do. After all, the ruins today must be cleaned up. If everyone is reluctant to move their fingers, then when is it ahead? But it is only within a few minutes that the man in black actually put the small bottle directly. I picked it up, but Lan Yuxian's life and death are unknown now, and I can't tell when I can't test my breath. Lan Yuxian definitely didn't die, but he was only in a deep coma. There must be something wrong with the juice. He just drank it like that, and didn't even drop a drop. This left him with no proof, and even no way to win. Lan Ying begged Gong Yi, hoping that he could help him settle this matter. Chapter 1072, Rescue. Gong Yi naturally also hopes, but it takes time and certain evidence. What can I do if the bottle can't be found? At this time, the slow-moving Yu suddenly appeared and held an inexplicable small the bottle, which had been trampled on a lot, were all the footprints of little foxes. At this time, he handed the thing to Gong Yi. Gong Yi, seeing this small bottle, his eyes lit up instantly. I didn't expect that he actually got this thing. No wonder what he thought was missing. At this time, it just means that he went to that place to find some ingredients. Who knew that when I came back on the way back, I saw a huge person with such a small bottle lying next to me. I felt that it was not symmetrical and picked it up. There was still a little juice in it. I took it directly. Inside the small bag, it has already begun to be stored. At this time, Gong Yi asked him to hand the small bag to him, and then look at the small bag when he got it. At this time, Lan Ying's complexion quickly solidified, even if Gong Yi didn't know this thing, he but familiar. This is the previous 4 Emperor Thieves, a punishment for outsiders or directly to those who evacuated from this regiment. It can be said to be a deadly poison. As long as it is taken, there is basically no possibility of surviving. Hearing Lan Ying's words at this moment, Gong Yi's expression became dull after that. It seems that this time Lan Yuxian didn't know whether to quit or was kicked out, but I didn't expect that no matter what choice, the 4 Emperor Thieves have to solve it. Moreover, after Lan Yuxian left that pirates, a new one was established, just to pick up people to grab Lan Ying, which I didn't think about at all, but those people were really good. Chilling, no wonder only 4 people can always stand at the top of this food chain. I have to say that Gong Yi is also in awe of those people, but there is no way, and there is nothing else for him. It is worth waiting, and now that everyone is already there, it is time to get up again, but this time Luo Zipping deliberately put himself aside, took out an inexplicable needle-like thing and handed it to himself. Said that this thing can find the door to that other world. Gong Yi was stunned for a moment, knowing that in the process of sailing, if there is a compass, it will be easy to use, but if it is in an unclear direction, it is difficult to use. If you follow this direction, there may be serious problems. At that time, once they are all in the world, they will not adapt to it, so Gong Yi does not want them to go through such a thing, so he decisively rejected Luo Zipping. At this time Luo Zipping's eyes dimmed after a while, he didn't say anything more. He took the compass and directly retracted it into his arms. This thing is definitely useful, and it is not suitable for a sailor like me to take this thing. After all, I should take them away and lose it, and they are my teammates, none of them can throw it down, and if you need it, you can take it out for a sailing lap. After hearing this, Luo Zipping's face was actually a little more depressed. Although he said that he knew what he was thinking, but there was no way to do it, such a situation was indeed rare for him, and no one was there. Let a person who can't shout at all go out alone. It seems that this time he should have made up his mind. After all, there is another task for Gong Yi, and that is to take Lan Yuxian to the treatment and find a suitable opportunity to successfully crack the juice on him. Mystery. But in the meantime, Gong Yi asked other questions about this little fox village chief. Seeing if he knew about this kind of thing, the village chief froze for a moment, then nodded, indicating that he knew about it. But I didn't want to reveal it, so it was considered a stalker, and a little news came out of the village chief's mouth. That is to say, there is actually a herbal medicine in the back mountain of this place that can treat this disease, but there is something that doesn't make sense. That is, this herb can only be used once, which means that if the disease occurs again, it will have no effect at all, and the person will also die. So at this moment Gong Yi asked some regarding Lan Ying's opinion. The other party quickly agreed. As long as Lan Yuxian can wake up and know who the culprit is, it will be more convenient to find him to settle accounts. There was too much distance between myself and him before. Chapter 1073. Seeing him like this now, and then about to part with it, still makes Lan Ying a little softer. After all, there was no dispute with Ant before. At this time, Gong Yi could only go back to find Aruma, and asked about him and Bobo. If he could, Bobo, as a local, still has some sense of direction. I hope he can take himself up the mountain. At the time, Aruma actually disagreed. You have to know that there may be other things on the back mountain, so I can't let Bobo accompany him on adventures, so Aruma decisively rejected Gong Yi, and if he said yes, he could accompany her, but Gong Yi disliked him very much. He was useless, and he didn't have any sense of direction. So Gong Yi went to look for Mayor, and then asked the village chief for a map, and the two of them set off on their journey. I have to say that the sword raised by the devil fruit is indeed better than Lan Ying's. A few points. After all, one of the 7 ancient weapons, but it is much more advanced than this. After all, there is still a big gap in time, but Mayer actually likes the sword that Lan Ying has transformed. Whether it can be used as a decoration in the hand, or is it really swinging that sword? After all, when he was beheading Lan Yuxian, Gong Yi came back looking really handsome, so when they were walking on the road, Mayer and Gong Yi brought up this topic, and Gong Yi just smiled shyly and didn't say something more, as if you don't want to touch on this topic. After all, I didn't think that the sword was actually transformed by Lan Ying. If I knew this fact, I would definitely not touch that sword. It felt like taking advantage of other girls. And I feel that Lan Ying has always liked Aruma very much, so I didn't intervene in the middle of doing things, but I always felt that the two of them could never get together, and Aruma spent all her thoughts on Bobo. On the body, these two things made me have some people who couldn't see through them. But before leaving, Shiliu specially gave a thing, like a sachet, and then stuffed it to Meyer next to him. This thing seems to be a special kind that can be used in this place, but sometimes it is necessary to understand a reason. This thing is not omnipotent. At least in one point, they can help, and they did not expect that this fate might play a greater role later. After all, it was understood later that the two of them fell into a cave, then there was nothing nearby, only total darkness and constant echoes. When the footsteps of two people hit the ground, it was obvious that the sound could be heard from the side, and I have to say, the sound was very clear, and it came from a long distance, and there was absolutely no sound under my feet. Any sound. That feeling made the two of them feel very strange, so Gong Yi took out his weapon, Mayer also showed his sword, and the devil's sword was also gleaming with starlight. Finally there was something in this place. There was a little bit of light, and at this time Gong Yi was extremely regretful. Why didn't he bring any lighting things before he came in? But thinking that this place is so humid, I'm afraid even the lights can't be lit, so I had no choice but to continue walking like this. Because of the weak light between the demons, it was easier for the two of them to explore the route in this place, but at this time, Gong Yi suddenly stepped on a creaking thing, and it was very hard, like it's like a bone. At this time, Gong Yi also rolled back and forth, as if to confirm his conjecture, and when he really bowed his head. The moment the lights illuminated, he found that he was indeed a bone, and it was a Mukuro bone similar to a head. And then a shadow appeared between the demons quickly. If you guessed correctly, that the creatures should have been entrenched in this cave for a long time, and it should be suitable for such a person, who can judge people in the absence of lights. Otherwise why would they be nothing? Just feel that Gigi Sha was attacked. This is a completely impossible thing. And according to his and Mayer's awareness, this is impossible. As a watchtower's watchman, he is usually responsible in the darkness. Without any feeling, then quickly lock on the place in one direction and move forward, and detect any reefs around. So say this, a feeling, including her facial features, in such a completely invisible situation it has been magnified infinitely, and it can be said that it is much more useful than Gong Yi's blind eye. Chapter 1074, Blizzard. Go back, there's something. After hearing this sentence, Gong Yi quickly stood behind him, and had to say that he should rely on him first, instead of being brave alone. After all, it is useless to quarrel in such a situation. But at the same time there is one thing that makes Gong Yi very surprised. Did this thing come? If I hadn't stepped on that piece of bone, would the two of them not have any feeling till now? It was also moving non-stop, but no one thought that it was actually a thing that could eat people. And those bones are creaking under their feet. Creak. I have to say that the feeling is indeed very terrifying. It can be said that I also feel a little creepy at this moment, but there is no other solution. If I can judge his appearance in a short period of time, and then judge some special points of him, I can still quickly capture it and kill it, but now I can't see anything. It is difficult in such a situation. I have experienced many things, and I am not a god. How can I solve all these things? But at this moment, Mayer, who was next to him, noticed that the breathing sound of an animal is the same as some creatures living in the dark, as long as he can capture the direction through his voice, and wait until he tells Gong Yi that after the incident, the other party just stared at him in a daze, but didn't understand what he was talking about. At this time, he had no choice but to sigh helplessly, and then stepped forward to solve it by himself. After all, sometimes he can't trust the man in front of him. He feels that he doesn't understand anything, and some of his reaction abilities in the dark are indeed better than his own. Speed it up a bit. This thing must be a creature that lives in the dark, and we can be captured by him no matter where we are, so we don't have to give up on speaking and breathing. He himself knows where we are, but his breathing is. It can only be heard after holding his breath, and it is very clear. As long as you want to know that he is there, you can judge by the sound. After hearing this sentence, Gongyi and Mayer never found any trace of the thing by relying on the reflection between the demons. It looked like a lizard with a quasi-like face. After arriving at this appearance, Gongyi couldn't help but be surprised, but Yi didn't respond. This made Gongyi stronger and suppressed the surprise in his heart. In fact, at this time, Mayer did not see where this thing was at all. I have to say that Gongyi was lucky and knew what kind of thing he was. In a split second, Gongyi pushed Mayer away. At this time, as a detective, Mayer actually didn't react at all. Did something come over or something appeared? But the moment he was knocked down, he saw an unknown object flying over him. With the help of shining among the demons, it seemed that it was a long reptile. It's a lizard with a human face. After hearing this sentence, Mayer observed it carefully, and suddenly found that this lizard was very strange, but this place was the only place where the herbal medicine for the treatment of Lan Yuxian could be obtained. At that time, there is no way to explain to Lan Ying. Other party was protecting them, and the remaining living talents slowly became one of the 7 ancient weapons, and then successfully killed Lan Yuxian, but in the end, they were very regretful and incomparable. In such a situation, a few people can't deal with him anymore, so they have to really help her find the antidote to save her father, and I don't know what kind of state their relationship will become in the future, but now, Lan Yuxian definitely can't die. But this intention is also a must between the two of them. The control factor, after all, this thing comes and goes without a trace, and it is fast and silent. Is it to rely on the willpower of 2 people to capture them? Completely it is. An impossible thing, so generally speaking, it still depends on the judgment of 2 people, but to what extent one can hear one, it is up to 2 people. But when a lizard walks back and forth, the rustling sound can still be amplified infinitely. It can be said that for 2 people, it's like a piece of cloth constantly rubbing against each other. Because when its claws are close to the rock wall, there is a sound between the upper and lower sides, but it is indeed blue to a certain extent. If it is not 2 people listening to it, the sound will not be felt at all, so said that at this moment, the 2 of them were also very attentive. Chapter 1075, Careful. After all, this is a life. If you are not careful, you will even lose your life. What else can you do for the real thing? But at this moment, I also let the 2 consider another point. Can defeating him be able to get the herbs? This place is so dark, how can you successfully touch it? At this time, it is too late to go back. After all, the 2 people can't tell where they are going back. Finally, the 2 of them touched a wall when they walked first, but what they never expected was that the wall was one after another, and they couldn't be lined up. At this time, Gongyi groped carefully and found that this one was actually human. A hill of bones piled up. This is not a wall. After a brief conversation, the 2 held their breath again, looking in the direction of the lizard. At this time, Gongyi heard the sound from above his head, and felt a cold sweat broke out from behind him. How could something appear behind him? But that icy feeling has come close to him, and his mind has no body temperature, so when he is close to him, he can feel that the temperature is dropping rapidly. It stopped absorbing its own heat, but it was also consuming its own stamina. Could it be that this mind still has the sanity to know how to quickly defeat 2 people? He didn't react, but he was hit by that lizard, and that sticky liquid dripped from his mouth. At this time, Mayer was about to go crazy, and he directly threw the demon sword. Penetrated into her body. But it didn't actually pierce that lizard's body, Instead the other party flashed faster than him, which made Meyer completely unresponsive. He was hit in the face by something just now, but when he figured it out after that, he quickly wiped his face with his hands. And the sticky feeling that made people feel particularly disgusting still stayed on his face. It was more disgusting than having a dream of being licked by an octopus, but at this time, it was not easy for the two of them to say anything more, so they had to keep silent and continue the next move. At this time, when the two of them did not move, something unexpected happened. After all, no one could have imagined that. The mind naturally stood behind them and locked in until Gong Yi took the first step. The lizard suddenly pounced on him and sprayed him with mucus, which made it difficult. So he directly pulled out his weapon and stabbed it, but it didn't succeed, and there was still that strange smell, but I have to say, Gong Yi succeeded in capturing a scale on his body. At this time, after holding it in my hand and pinching it a few times, I found that this thing seemed to be the same as I thought. After all, how could such a thing appear in a lizard? So is it a mutant species? After establishing such an idea, Gong Yi felt that Meyer might recognize this thing, so he simply handed the thing in his hand to him. I found that Meyer was nowhere to be found. Where did he go? Did the two people get lost in the incident just now? I didn't expect that when I was dodging just now, there was such a big distance, so there was no single needle gong at this moment. Yi decided to find Meyer first. After all, it doesn't matter what this thing is, the important thing is that you can't leave your brother in this place during this trip, but there are still people waiting for you outside, so you must shorten the time for your actions. Where are you? But what makes people feel more panic is that this time, there is no voice for that answer. I could still hear Meyer's voice before. Although the distance between the two is infinitely farther, at least you can also sense the presence of others. This is a relatively good thing, but I didn't expect that everything seems to be not so perfect now. After all, everyone else has disappeared at this moment. But I can't make some other reactions. After all, some things are like this for me. Once I do something, I have already considered it. It's a good thing there. With such an attitude, there may be some unexpected events. Meyer, can you hear me? But there was no echo at this time, only that. The sound of lizards walking back and forth, another very sudden thought that appeared in Gong Yi's mind at this time, whether Meyer was eaten by him was thinking about it. After this idea, Gong Yi was very angry and directly drew his sword and rushed up. I have to say, this discovery seems to be really a momentary thing, because of the light of the demon sword before, although this light is meager, but makes Gong Yi unable to ignore. Chapter 1076. Traces. The other hand, Meyer seems to have disappeared without a trace all the time, and he didn't notice that, so if he said that, the demons should always be in his hands, and where the light is, he should be there. So Gong Yi closed his eyes tightly, opened them quickly at the last moment, captured a circle of bright places, only to find that there was only a small corner, but that corner kept moving, not difficult to imagine that it should be a moving object. But when Meyer was with him, he was always in a very cautious state. How could he be moving at a high speed in this place? At this time, Gong Yi thought of another conjecture. Could it be that this lizard has already dismantled him? I've eaten it, otherwise why would the sword flash back and forth with his footsteps? After thinking of this, Gong Yi quickly picked up the sword in his hand and looked at the bright light. When approaching, he swung the sword directly, and as expected, it was the sound of the sword piercing the flesh. The lizard let out a scream, and then quickly dropped a plate to escape. How could Gong Yi let go at this time? He left, so he quickly drew his sword and chased after it, and cut off its tail, but I have to say that the lizard's tail doesn't seem to be of any use. But the object that was shaking all of a sudden, suddenly glowed. I didn't expect its tail to be an object that illuminated the place, and without thinking about it, Gong Yi picked up a wooden stick from the side and pulled it where it on top, and then continued to walk forward with great strides. Could it be that because of this little setback, he gave up everything in the back? Looking at everything around me, no matter what the point is, I have to find Meyer. When a voice came from above my head, it was the kind of water dripping on the ground. That I heard the same sound as when I met the lizard, but I didn't dare to lock it so firmly at this moment. This is the lizard. Otherwise, something went wrong at that time. Who will settle the account? This tale is really bright. Gongyi relied on it to go through the second half of the journey, and I have to say that the structure in this cave can be seen clearly at once. What a waste that feels like a captivity. Was the same dim and damp dungeon, but before confirming these, Gongyi still couldn't find Meyer, and the lizard no longer appeared. But you can always hear the ticking sound of water coming from the cave. If you guessed correctly, it should be the sound of her saliva, so here is the starting point to find this thing, including some other in terms of aspects, but I have to say that there are some things that really make it more difficult for me to do. A girl suddenly appeared in front of him and fell to the ground. Gongyi hurriedly stepped forward to help her up, although he said he saw something inexplicable behind him, but after all, it was under the control of others. It would be a good thing to be able to mix the real with the fake, not to mention the chance of this girl appearing. It is too coincidental, thinking of my own path, and if I guessed correctly, there is no one living in this cave at all. How could it be possible for him to appear like this? Therefore, despite being suspicious, Gongyi silently helped people up. After all, if he really wants to do something, everyone can take advantage of it now, and he can also understand what their true colors are. But the little girl didn't do anything, just thanked him and left Gongyi quickly. Looking at his appearance, he couldn't help but feel a little strange. Was he just here to give himself a surprise? He just wanted to remind him. Thinking of reminding this time, Gongyi suddenly found another clue. If he guessed correctly, the girl took something from her when she just came. What is it? At this time, when I touched it up and down, I found that the sign I gave earlier was missing. It was a sign that the two people found before entering the cave, and it was still placed in the most conspicuous part of the cave. Same here. So Meyer hadn't seen it before, and didn't expect to find it in such a conspicuous place. Later, Gongyi kept wondering why he was the most faithful to this matter. The fiery Meyer didn't pick up the sign at this moment. When she picked it up and put it in front of Meyer, she couldn't help but be stunned. In fact, he didn't see the sign at all, so at this moment, he let it go. Gongyi was taken aback. Is this something just for himself to see? Fei Lu reminds you. 3 things to read, collect, recommend, and share. Read the latest chapter. Baidu search 99 Playmate find 99 Novel Network. Please keep this paragraph, otherwise you will be banned from collecting IP. Chapter 1077. Juice, first. If this is the case, then he may be able to be used in the next cave, so Gongyi quickly picked up the gold medal at this moment, put him in his pants kabuto, and really wanted to be killed at this moment. A little girl cheated away, and Gongyi immediately chased after him without hesitation. The little girl walked in a hurry and didn't run at all, but Gongyi was running behind, just. She couldn't catch up, as if there were thousands of mountains between them. At this time Gongyi I found that I had stepped into a formation. No wonder the little girl walked farther and farther. It turned out that he had set up a barrier before, waiting for him in this place. Gongyi was helpless and very discouraged, and had to sit on the ground and look back. I found that there was a rustling sound coming from that place, and a head also appeared in the grass. It looked very familiar, like the lizard from before, but at this moment Gongyi had to do a good job. Be vigilant. He quickly transformed the sword and looked at the unknown thing in front of him, but he didn't do much, just kicked a small bottle over with his foot, and then left directly. He didn't reply, as if he was afraid that he would attack him. The corner of Gongyi's mouth twitched when he saw this scene. It is really a very novel thing. In this cave, you can meet all kinds of people, at first a little girl who can steal things, and later a lizard who can kick things. He picked up the bottle. Gongyi's expression froze for a while. After all, the color of the liquid was very similar to the one he had seen in Lan Yuxian's hands before. If you guessed correctly, they should be the same. Yes, then why does this lizard also have such a thing? It seems that the mastermind behind the scenes should be in this cave. After taking this potion, he must find Meyer in the shortest time, and then take him to find that the mastermind behind. But you must know that once you drink this thing, other symptoms may occur, so how to resolve it at that time is not up to you, and Lan Yuxian could not even maintain his sanity at that time. Gong Yi wasn't sure if he would have any other problems after taking the drug, and the juice smelled really weird, but it tasted the same as the one that you handed him. The inside of the sachet. So in desperation, Gong Yi had no choice but to do it, but he kept his mind at the bottom of the bottle, and it blew a little bit. If he was still conscious, he could do some experiments to explore it after returning, as expected. Just after drinking this juice, the bones quickly rubbed and generated heat, and a series of changes occurred, and I could also feel that my body was constantly expanding. NT seemed to dare to get close to him. It seemed that this time he should be able to solve the trouble, but at the same time, Gong Yi also discovered another benefit. The surrounding environment can be seen so clearly, it seems that this is really a rare good thing. It's like turning on the night light, it's very clear, but at the same time, the water ticking is also amplified infinitely, which makes me a little upset, but there is no other way to solve it. But after all, it has already happened, what else can I say along that? The sound of the water flow. Gong Yi found another exit of the cave, but there was no sign of Meyer on the way. This made him a little surprised, and then he walked around again, and walked through all the forks, but found that there was no whereabouts, and no trace of anyone passing by. Immediately there was another light from the other side of the artifact, very weak, which made Gong Yi think of the previous, Meyer's demon sword, which also emitted this kind of weak light, so he did not hesitate. He walked over there and found that this place was indeed his hiding place. Meyer had more than 10 wounds, large and small, especially on the right side of his chest, although he missed the position of his heart, but it was also a very deep wound. Part of it has been soaked with blood. I have to say, who did it? Why I hate it so much. Is it the lizard just now? With its sharp claws, it is indeed possible, but at this time I dare not too sure. After all, this thing is not a joke. But without any hesitation, Gong Yi directly carried the person on his back. He ran to the side of a stream to help him clean the wound, and then wrapped the cloth around his wound. Chapter 1078. Rescue, Second More. He took him back to the village to seek help from the doctor. At this time, the village chief was surprised when he saw his appearance, and quickly picked up the scepter and planned to resist, but at this time Gong Yi suddenly made a voice, and the village chief said this. Then he put down the scepter and told everyone around him not to make a fuss. No one could have imagined that Gong Yi had become like this. Lan Ying was still a little bit nervous when she saw Gong Yi. God thought it was her own father. She was healed and stood in front of her. Maybe it was Lan Yuxian who was injured so badly that time, plus that medicine and sequelae, he would definitely not be able to wake up for a while. I thought it was him back. What about you? There is no way. Meyer was injured suddenly. There is a special intention in that cave. If you can, go and find out the news with the village chief. In fact, Gong Yi also wants to solve this matter by his own strength, but let's not talk about other things involved. There are many, and the village chief may not have such a big power to investigate. After all, they still have to continue to live. Yes, if they interfere too much, it may change their lives and some trajectories. Gong Yi didn't want to do such a thing either. Lan Ying said that you listened to the persuasion and went to the side to ask the village chief about this juice. The village chief asked after he took it over, and his expression changed quickly. It can be said that this is a very serious expression, but Lan Ying didn't know what it was. Gong Yi, who was on the sidelines, quickly understood after seeing his expression. It turns out that all of this is really a repeat offender and a mastermind, but it has nothing to do with the village chief. But what the situation is, we have to wait until I have decided on it. After all, this matter is not trivial. At this moment, the surrounding environment suddenly changed, the ground suddenly sank, and the surrounding ground kept rising. The village chief's face froze for a while. This was a disaster. At this moment, the moment the ground was sinking, all the animals appeared in that place. After Gong Yi really saw it clearly, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Isn't this the one who was embarrassing Meyer in the cave? What's the matter? There are so many puppies, it has always been a little hard to deal with, and now there are so many, it is to give myself a little headache, but at this moment, some things are like this, and there is no way to use other methods to theorize. Let's do it. At this time, the village chief also looked at Z, as if to imply that he had made a choice. After receiving his signal, Gong Yi turned his head around at the fastest speed in his life and did not look at the village chief anymore. He was so kind to himself before, and now it is too much to measure himself with such a thing. But at this time Lan Ying took a step forward, tugged at the corner of her clothes, and gestured to that. There was still a figure of Lan Yuxian in the small house. At this time Gong Yi stretched out his hand to comfort him, since these thoughts were if it came to these people, then that comatose Lan Yuxian would be completely harmless to them. Don't worry, I'll rescue him when I get the chance. Now that he's in a coma, it might be safer to stay in that place than to hang around here with us. It's better to let him stay there first. Stay somewhere. After hearing this, he pondered for a while, and then nodded, but at this time the village chief on the side didn't think so. He kept looking at himself, and even his eyes revealed a kind of information, as if it was indicating something to himself. But at this time, Gong Yi didn't pay any attention to it at all, and just stared at the things in front of him. Maybe this was what he wanted to do most, instead of looking at the people on the side, but at the same time, this matter was not you can handle it if you want to. It was true that we were wrong about the previous incident. Now we have thought about it. Among this group of people, you are the only one who has the most strength to protect this place. I hope you can help us this time. After all, what happened last time was true. It was me who went too far, but there was no way, it was my villagers, and I couldn't just watch them die like this. At this time, Gong Yi was silent for a while. I don't speak like that, although I am not the village head, but I still know that they should have their own life running, not that I need to worry about it from the beginning to the end. And everyone has a certain number in their life. I don't think it's good for me to come and intervene, and you? Don't you have any curses on the little foxes? If you have nightmares at that time, wouldn't it cause trouble? Chapter 1079. Cooperate. 3rd. After hearing this, the village chief did not say any more, but returned to his place. After all, sometimes things are like this. Once it is found that the other party cannot communicate, then there is no need to continue talking, and the original intention of the individual is not too big, the same. But at this time, Gong Yi obviously discovered another point. Those who are interested in whoring are not those little foxes, but his own direction, so Gong Yi changed his mind and asked the village chief if he would like to cooperate once. The village chief, of course, he readily agreed. After all, for these lizards, being able to recruit a big man is undoubtedly the best solution at this time, but at this time, you can't rely too much on others, otherwise, if an emergency occurs, it may be difficult to prevent it. As the ground collapsed, more rocks fell, and at this time Gong Yi stepped forward. Basically it can be said that one person propped up a world. Those little foxes and people all fell together. Never find out that they can get together so peacefully. The same way, Lan Ying's arms are all those little foxes. They also felt the warmth of humans' embrace, but they were not as vicious and cruel as the person in their memories, betrayed all their news. At this time, Gong Yi couldn't help laughing when he saw this cooperation scene. After seeing his smile like this, the village chief showed a complicated look in his eyes. He didn't expect him to be such a person. It seems that this time I have the heart of a villain, the belly of Kun's son, but there is no way. His face looks exactly the same as that person before. I can't let myself let go of the grudge in my heart. This is completely impossible, and Gong Yi naturally knew what the village chief was thinking at this time, so he didn't force it, but Mayer was still pulled on it. I don't know if anyone can put him in the situation when he is seriously injured. He takes care of it. But in the following words, it may be bad enough to be injured, but judging from some of the wounds on Mayer's body, then those lizards' attack power should be very strong. Their claws have penetrating power. Don't let them get close, and you can see that the wounds on Mayer's body were scratched by these thoughts, and the big holes on the bag are all these. The lizard's hands pulled out. So let's give you a vaccination first, and try to stay away from him if you encounter it. He should not know about the following situation, or he won't stand on the top. After hearing this, the little foxes all let out a surprised voice. No one thought that Mayer's serious injury was caused by these thoughts. But at this time, a ray of light flashed in Lan Ying's eyes. Although Mayer is usually a very unruly person, and he prefers to stay with Aruma for a while, he also needs to understand that Mayer is the first to enter. The group of people who belonged to him were also the same people who were expected and even cared for by Gong Yi. At this time, how can she not worry if something happened to her companion? So Lan Ying looked up at Gong Yi and wanted to ask him if he had any treatment plan. But she found that she had a lot of gravel on her head, and then kept putting them aside, and then used her own flesh and blood to protect the rest of these little foxes, and there were constantly new ones jumping down. Gong Yi has to catch them again and throw them up so that they don't have any chance to get close to these little foxes. This situation also made Lan Ying's eyes quiver for a moment, but at this time, Aruma next to him sensed the other party's emotions and reached out and patted Lan Ying's shoulder. It is beyond the scope of your expectations, and then these things happen, and Luo Zipping, Shiliu and Shiliu's brother are also within this scope. To be said that Gong Yi made a great contribution this time, but at this time he still did not forget the one on his body. The small bottle, she quickly gave this thing to Lan Ying, and then asked him to take off her own the plastic bag on the waist, compare the two to see if they are the same thing. After Lan Ying took a closer look, she smelled the smell again and almost took a sip. It was definitely the same thing. I didn't expect this juice to spread so far. She was still in Lan Yuxian's drawer before. Having seen something like this, he said at the time it was only a century. Although he didn't explain it to Lan Ying, but in the process of trading with another person, he was lying at the door and overheard. They kept repeating the function of this thing, and even raised the price in the end to very high. I have to say that this thing must be a rare treasure, otherwise it would be impossible to tolerate him so much, and if the price is so high, those people will definitely take action. Chapter 1080, Juice. It seems that what happened now is beyond what I expected, but the eyes thought that this thing was passed down from Lan Yuxian's hands. No wonder Gong Yi was always looking for a small bottle by her side at that time. It seemed that this matter really started because of him, and he had trusted her quite a bit. But at this moment, he really let himself down. He didn't expect that after trusting him for so long, his father gave him a fatal blow in the end. If I could have another chance, I would definitely not choose to believe him at the beginning. At that time, a policeman often came to my home to ask about such things. Ask if there is a thing that has been parked in this house. It is a medicine bottle, which contains a purple juice. Every time he accepts such cross-examination, his father has only one answer, that is, he has never seen that bottle, and he keeps intimidating himself and telling them such an answer, but he actually knows what it is. But because of some pressure from his father, he didn't dare to say the real answer. Unexpectedly, in the end, it prompted some of his research, and the CPPCC was completed. In this case, the people of the 4 Emperor Pirates should have a bottle. Everyone has something like this in hand, and it can be said to be a particularly well-equipped one. No one has ever seen such a pirate group. I am afraid that when they meet a Navy admiral at this time, the other party may not be able to defeat them. Therefore, during that time, Lan Ying is still very glad that she has put away such emotions, otherwise whether or not he can survive until now is another matter. At this moment, a lizard suddenly jumped on his back. Before Gong Yi had time to react, Lan Ying quickly turned into the original sword. She kept fluttering up and down, as if at this time, Gong Yi didn't have time to hesitate when he motioned for the man in front of him to lift it up. After all, everyone was waiting for him to save his life. At this time, if there are some other reasons, there may be some other problems, so Gong Yi without hesitation directly pulled out the sword. The light shining on it was a sword without a scabbard. This is indeed an unreasonable one. Have to help Lan Ying find a sword in the future, but in this situation, shouldn't couples be able to make the same scabbard? For his own reasons, he missed other people's feelings, or some other reasons, and I don't know if he still likes Aruma now. I feel that the atmosphere of the two of them is always so subtle. But the same is true for Mayor. I feel that all the people on the boat are like this, helping each other, and then they can take care of any problems together, making myself feel that everyone has affection for each other. Let yourself suddenly have a hard choice. It seems that the matter between them is only up to them. But at this time Gong Yi still had to take on all this, so he waved Lan Ying around and killed some hopes. After the first one jumped down, each one kept going down one after the other. And, feeling that their offensive was getting more and more fierce, Gong Yi simply turned that sword straight up. At this time, I don't know what it feels like. Anyway, after such a high-speed rotation, I can avoid the live events that fell, and bounce back the new ones that fell. I have to say it is true, it was a good thing that didn't take much effort. At this time, the village head set up a barrier on it, as if to relieve himself of the pressure. Gong Yi looked at him gratefully. This thing can only last for a while, and it can only protect these. The falling rubble doesn't hit these children, but you still need to focus on dealing with those thoughts. This evaluation can only last for 10 minutes, and the subsidence of the ground should also stop within this period of time, so the current situation can only depend on you. After hearing this, Gong Yi reacted. It turns out that everyone is trying to buy time for themselves, and they are still choosing some other things at this time. It seems that at this time, they should really think about how to do it. And Lan Ying was also at this time, and suddenly he barked, as if resonating. At this moment, Gong Yi suddenly felt that everyone around him was supporting him, as if not all of them were alone fighting here. And at present, they are also very grateful to themselves. Just like the village chief, they have brought out their unique skills. Isn't this enough to prove something? I could not help but have some tears in my eyes.